You're listening to Agile Ideas, the podcast, hosted by Fatimah Abuchi. For anyone listening out there not having a good day, please know there is help out there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Agile Ideas. I'm Fatimah, CEO at Agile Management Office, Mental Health Ambassador, and your host. This podcast is made possible thanks to Agile Management Office. We help businesses in three key ways: improving organizational culture and delivery, supporting transformation and change, and streamlining governance and processes using 20 years of proven practice and the AMO Way model. In today's episode, I will be talking to Michael Bartura. For over 3 decades, Michael has been working with teams across manufacturing, education, health, hospitality, and not-for-profit sectors with a specific passion and focus on training and organizational development. With senior management experience in 4 continents, he brings to the table a well-refined cross-cultural mentoring capacity and a managerial acumen amassed in both not-for-profit and business contexts. Michael holds a master's degree in management and taught classes on leadership, self-awareness, and emotional intelligence for the School of Life and now the Small Giants Academy. He has extensive experience in reflecting and conscious leadership practices and delivers insightful and engaging classes, workshops, seminars, and group work through non-denominational science-based methodologies. In Australia, Michael founded Happy Habits Coaching using principles of servant leadership and positive neuroplasticity, a mindfulness-based approach to increase self-awareness of the brain's tendency for negative biases and better deal with anxiety and fear. Michael listens deeply, empathetically, and non-judgmentally, and is committed to helping his clients better understand how their minds are limiting their growth and happiness, and how mental patterns that served us well while evolving on the savannah are not well suited to modern times and get in the way of life worth living. So please join me in welcoming Michael to the show. Hi, Michael. How are you going?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for joining us, and you're making me envious of your beach backdrop. I do wish I was at the beach looking over.
Myself envious.
It's amazing. I've already given people a bit of a background about you through your bio, and I wanted to start there. I read a couple of things in there, and I'm really curious for you to sort of give a bit more information. So
Sure.
One of the key things that that really stood out for me was around your concept of mindfulness-based approach to increase self-awareness of the brain's tendency for negative biases and better deal with anxiety and fear. So can you explain for us what that means and how it applies for us in our sort of day-to-day? I'm really passionate about this space. I'm really curious to your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, excuse me, the trickiest part for us as a being, as a human, as an animal in a sense, like the way we show up in a daily walkabout, we say in Australia, but basically through your day, right? The biggest trick for us is that we are operating within a very modern environment that has all the stimulations and the realities of living, most of us, and certainly the people who are likely to listen to the podcast, 21st century modern, sort of alive with all the mods and cons that come with that. But underneath it, we still operate with a brain that was really desiring all the time to keep us safe within the understanding that we evolved on the savannah, and therefore we probably, for the brain, as far as the brain is concerned, there's tigers out there, there's lions out there, in the savannah, and tigers out there if you're in the jungle. And so we continuously clash between the reality, which is this modern reality, and the stressors that it provides, and a brain that's trying to deal with the understanding that there's stress in my life. But what it knows about stress is it knows how to operate a system that means to fight or fly, or flee, right? And so imagine yourself 100,000 years ago on the savannah. It's a very kind of known entity. You might have an unknown element in that experience coming at you. You didn't expect it. But whatever it is, whether it's a lion, it's a bunch of hyenas, it's another tribe that's trying to take your territory, whatever it is, this is stuff that the brain knows how to deal with, and it knows what to do in terms of reacting. When you get on a train with 3,000 people, when you get into the office and you open your inbox and there's 60 emails that waiting for an answer, and you know that you got like the important meeting in 2 hours, and you got to go through the emails and answer, or you got to prepare, or you got a deadline, or you're in a meeting and someone, and it does happen unfortunately in a corporate situation especially, someone is posturing, or someone is kind of like being a bit nasty or gnarly to you in terms of whatever it is, and there's sort of like turf and territories and elbowing each other. All of that takes that ancient system that was meant to fight tigers and bears and lions and spring it into action as is, okay, I'm in a tiger territory and now I have to fight that. But the fighting was meant to be done in a very particular way.
Yep.
You can't do that sort of fighting, right?
100%.
So we're continuously getting triggered in a way that's not healthy for our system. And it's important for us to understand it, because we can learn how to recognize triggers and put them around them as sort of an envelope of understanding that knows, oh, okay, that's triggering to my system, not actually being eaten alive by lions.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that, right? And it takes training, and it takes practice, and it takes self-awareness and recognition. But we have the capacity to sort of step back from our experience, and instead of spending our day fighting and being in neurosis, right, in a psychology of being hunted, we shift into recognizing, oh, that's a challenge. Okay, what can I do about it? How do I respond appropriately? And I think you'll find that the people who are very successful in the corporate world, especially in this day and age, are the one who knows how to do it. In the old days, a lot of managers, a lot of top leaders were just gnarly in the way that they were doing it. So if something didn't work, they would yell around everyone, and everyone will, and try and do whatever. That doesn't work anymore, and it shouldn't. We don't live in that reality anymore. So knowing how to be self-aware for when you get triggered and deal with that anxious kind of feeling that arising in your body, because your body is doing what it's meant to do. It's doing, I'm going to protect you against the threat.
Yes.
How to work with that system, and how to calm it down, and how to move from, the fight or flight into the rest and digest, our sympathetic to parasympathetic nerve system, all that sort of stuff. That's very much part and parcel of what I do.
It's amazing that you described that. First of all, thanks for describing my day this morning with 60 emails and the deadlines and all that. That was me. So I don't know how you knew that. But no, in all seriousness, I'm really sort of passionate and understand what you're talking about, because triggers is something that I've been learning a little bit about as well over the years. And I'm very vocal about the fact that I've got my own generalized anxiety disorder. I've had that for most of my adult life, and I've learned through conversations with psychologists and other things that the triggers is, and once some people don't know their triggers, which is really fascinating, but once you know the triggers, you're right, it's about working out how to manage those triggers. And I love the analogy of the savannah. One of the I'm not sure if you're familiar, but one of the books that I've read that actually talks to this kind of concepts is called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Have you heard of that one? Yeah,
yes, of course.
It pretty much talks to what you're just saying, Michael, and it's fascinating because you're right. Like zebras and lions and all these animals, and they don't deal with the stresses that we deal with. But now it's up to us to identify those triggers and work out what we're going to do about them. So it's really interesting.
And if I may, because you brought up zebras, it's a really good way to elaborate a little bit about the mechanism that's going on. When you look at a bunch of zebras, most of us have seen zebras through the television screen, but nevertheless, if you ever watched any David Attenborough show or any of those, right, you see a bunch of zebras, and what do they do for the majority of the time? They kind of hang around, and they eat, and they they just chilling together and doing their thing, right? And then suddenly there is a predator attack, and all of them spring into action and running for their life. But within 10 to 20 minutes, what do you see the zebras doing again? In other words, either the lions got a zebra or they didn't get a zebra. Within 10 to 20 minutes, regardless of the result of the hunt for the lions, what do the zebras do?
They go back to what they were doing.
They chilling and eating together, right? So their nerve system, you can use language around green and red in terms of the way that our nerve system operates.
Yes.
Right. Their nerve system is kind of like chilling out on a green zone, and then suddenly there is a red spike, and they're running, and then within very short time it goes back in the green zone.
100%.
Us, because we have a very similar nerve system, and because modern life is full of stresses, whether it's again like 3,000 people on a train is not something that your nerve system was meant to work with.
No, definitely not.
Again, on the savannah, a tribe, all the people around you. There's 100 or 150 of them, and if you see a foreign face, your nerve system thinks first and foremost that's likely someone I have to prepare to either run away from or fight. Right?
Absolutely.
And so all these foreign faces. So from the word go, our nerve system is kind of like on a low hum of red. And it's in this sort of like red, spike red because there was a deadline, red, spike red because there was a meeting and someone was a bit, antsy, and red. So you go through the whole day kind of like from low red to high red to low red to high red. And then after 2 months, you really need a holiday, and you want to get into a green zone, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're lucky, or you build yourself into, sort of a fairly solid system, then you might go and do, like exercise, or you hang out with friends. That kind of brings you back into the green zone. But a nerve system lives in a very foreign territory in terms of what it was meant to do. And zebras don't get ulcers, but we do because of that. Right?
I know. And I just thought it was quite funny, because when you read it and you're sort of trying to understand it, it's just so incredibly similar to, so like the description is so similar. And I think the key thing is figuring out what we can do about it. So staying in that high state of stress, rather, it really takes its toll on the body. And I think that leads to burnout and other things. So like, how do we recognize the symptoms of that? Like, how do we know if we're constantly in too high of a red state that's going to lead to those sorts of things? What would you recommend?
So two things. First is that most of us know when we're not in a good state, right? We sometimes get so used to be in that state that we think that is our default state. Here comes, I have my coffee, or I have my double shot espresso in the morning, and I'm go the whole day. And it's kind of like that's normal, right? But why do we love holidays? Why do we love, barbecue on Sunday afternoon with friends? Because that's actually a natural state.
Yes.
And we meant to sort of be in that. So if we just stop for a sec and ask ourselves, how do I feel right now? Do I feel like I'm on the run? Am I running away from something, like some sort of a deadline, a tiger, whatever it is, right? Or am I kind of like chilling? And if we tune into that, we sort of know whether we are already triggered or already in a state of emergency as far as our inner, sort of biochemistries, right? The second thing is that you are like if you think about it, Michael Neal talks about this idea that babies don't need psychological treatments. They're fine. I mean, they have their needs. They need to be fed, and they need to be dry, and they need to be warm, but they don't have all this stuff going on, right? And so another element that is useful for us in terms of this kind of like reality check is asking, do I actually have a problem right now? Because most of the problems that we have are problems that we have because we are in our heads arguing with what's going on. Some way we argue with reality. We don't like what's going on, or we want it to go a different way, or we have an issue with someone that in our reality and we don't like the way they behave. And so we argue with reality, and that in its own sense is that's an anxious state. Byron Katie says wonderfully, if you're going to argue with reality, you're going to lose. But only 100% of the time. Right? So what can we do about that? How do we actually train our brains to recognize and then interact with reality in a more resourceful way? That's the essence of it.
100%.
Short-term and medium-term and long-term sort of activations and that you can adopt, and practices that you can engage with, that over time train your brain to be less reactive, less, sort of less engaged with the stress of it, and more able to kind of like have a baseline, which is, yeah, I can take on what I need to do, and it might not feel nice all the time.
Yeah.
I'm okay, I'm on top of it.
It's how we react. It's really interesting because I know for myself, one of the biggest learnings has been about learning. And one of the things, other than triggers, one of the other things is learning how to manage emotions. And sometimes we don't realize emotions, not just the, happy and sad, but even the stress, the moments we're in stress, learning to recognize those, as you suggested, has been immensely helpful personally. And it's really interesting because I feel like learning the triggers, understanding your emotions, and then figuring out that reset, as you say, it could be waiting for a holiday, but not all of us are lucky enough to take a holiday every couple of months. So we need to figure out how to do something about it day to day so that we don't get to that level.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you talk, Michael, you've talked about some of the negatives, obviously, around this space. But when it comes to neuroplasticity, what's the positive side? Like, what's positive neuroplasticity?
So your brain is the sum total of your experience. In other words, your experience, as they happen over and over and over and over again, shapes the way that your neural pathways and connections are operating. And over time, it builds them into sort of like a highway of, messages that are going, oh, this happens, that's the response that I do, right? Think about a baby trying to walk. Like on average, I think the number is like between, say, 600 and 1,200 times, baby get up and fall and get up and fall and get up and fall and get up and fall. First thing, interesting to know, they don't give up. Right?
100%.
598 times, and they're like, oh, that's too difficult, I'm just not going to drop walking altogether. No, they don't. They just keep doing it until they learn, right? So there's something there about temerity, about sticking to a particular practice, that until you wire your brain to behave as the default statement of that particular moment, right? And most of us are wired for negativity.
Yeah.
Because again, that helps survival. Nature cares so much whether we're happy or not, whether we're in a good state or not. It cares very much whether we are old enough to, pass on our genes to the next generation. That's what nature wants. So as far as nature is concerned, if you're wired to think about what's the worst that's going to happen, right, and interact with reality along those lines, you get a better chance of survival than if you kind of like, oh, everything is good and I'm sort of trusting everything, right? Because if you walk down, sort of like the footpath on the way to the waterhole on the savannah again, and there is a source of food, like a bush of fruit, something with fruit or anything that is a source of food, you can like, oh, great, I'm going to eat something, and you stop and you eat. But if you missed it, not a big deal, because you'll notice it tomorrow, or there will be another source of food, another 20 meters down the path. If you missed danger, if you miss the fact that, at a certain time of the day, the lions are coming down to drink water at the waterhole, you're never going to eat another piece of fruit in your life. So as far as nature is concerned, anything that might be slightly negative is worth remembering a lot more than anything that might be slightly positive. And what the research shows is that we tend to embed and engage with negative stimulus much faster and much stronger than we do with a positive stimulus.
Yeah.
If you have a positive experience, for example, you had lunch, you had coffee with a friend, and you had a great time. By the evening, there's not going to be a lot of it that's kind of like left as a residual present experience within your system. But if you had an argument in a meeting at lunchtime with someone at work, what do you do for the rest of the day? You kind of ruminate, you marinate in that, like you have variations of that argument in your head, trying to justify to yourself, why are you pissed off with them? And you were right, and all that sort of stuff. So we tend to be wired for negativity, and around 80% of our daily thoughts are of, in a way, contracted or negative nature. Positive neuroplasticity is taking the same mechanism, the understanding that if you repeat things over and over again, you wire your brain for that to become your engagement, your reality, your experience, and you consciously curating that experience and that engagement in such a way that it kind of becomes your default state to start with. Rick Hanson, who's the teacher that I've studied and practiced with, this idea of positive neuroplasticity, says something very beautiful. He says the brain, right, and the mind interact with each other, because the way you think impact the way that your brain is wired. And in fact, that there's an old adage, nerves that fire together wire together, right? But if you go one step beyond, you can say that the mind impacts the brain, and then because the brain is now wired for a more positive experience, the brain impacts the mind. So now you perceive your experience in a different light, because you've already worked on not taking things personally, not getting so triggered, not getting so wired up about something. I'll give you an example in an office context. You walk into the office in the morning, meet someone, and you say, "Hey, Fatimah, how are you doing?" And Fatimah goes, like whatever, something, bursting out with something. Most of us will, by default, because our brain is wired to do that, we'll see that as an attack. I might not think that you personally attacking me.
Yeah.
The system is going to see that as an attack, because it's something that, those sort of, it's coming at me, right? And likely then what I'm doing with it is, like, why maybe last week I did a meeting and I said something, now she doesn't like me, going to those head trips about it. And now we kind of like, instead of just letting it go, now we, again, marinating in the negative experience that I've just had with you, and that becomes my reality.
Yeah.
Versus I'm coming in and someone is going, blah, 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 and I'm going, wow, okay, they have a really tough day, and like, give them some space, or say, hey, I see that you're really stressed. Can I make you a cup of tea? Is there anything I can do to you? So the stimuli is exactly the same.
Yes.
But how I approach it is sum total of my approach to stressful situations in life. And it is in your control to change the way you engage with stress. You can do that.
100%. It's a reaction.
Your brain to do that.
Yeah, 100%. It's interesting, because some people would, like a lot of people, like I said, most would react that way. There might be others that don't, and you just wonder, how are they doing what they're doing? Like, particularly, you see some really high-powered executives that, so how do they manage it all? How are they, they don't seem, I've worked with some really senior people that I just wonder how they never look stressed, no matter the sort of the red flags that are going off. But what I liked is I like that brains being the sum total of your experience. But you've just outlined one of the things I was going to ask about is, like, it is possible to rewire our brains. And I think a lot of that work comes down to lots and lots of, different techniques. But one of the ones that I've heard a lot about and I've personally experienced is the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is obviously one of the key things that you can do to help with, mental health issues like anxiety and others. So you can absolutely rewire your brain. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And get this is where it gets really kind of, both kind of, oh my God, that's weird and exciting, right? We don't actually interact with our external experience. We interact with the way we think about our external experience.
Yes.
Even our thoughts. We don't have the experience.
Yes.
We have what we think about the experience.
Yes.
In that, we got a lot of space with conscious applications of mindful-based practices, one way or another, but basically with self-awareness, we have a lot of space to choose reactions that are more resourceful, less, combative, less reactive, build a sense of like, it's like I can serve this. Life is pretty intense, right? It's a wave that I can surf because I know how to stand on my surfboard, and I'm going there because I've got that wave here.
Go for it.
Surf on my standboard, and the wave will take me here and there, but I know how to kind of, sort of schmooze with it, and that capacity is something that you can get better at. And the better you get at it, the less you need to kind of like fall under the waves, and because you're like everything else, you learn to surf yourself better.
And like you said, it takes time. And I think just for those that are listening and are not aware of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT for sure, it goes back to what you just said. So it's the thoughts and then the feelings that you have, and then the behavior you take, or in any sort of cadence. It could be a feeling that leads to thoughts and behaviors and whatnot. So I think it's really powerful. Understanding that goes back to the concept of emotions, and then also understanding your triggers. And I think if people can spend the time to learn about those, but I find really helpful to be working with either experts or psychologists or counselors or whatever it might be to work through this, because I know for myself, you can't work through it on your own. You need that external input to be able to really rewire your brain and go through that process.
Yeah, because if you're in the middle of a crisis, as far as your brain concerned, to be able to actually inside that experience of being in crisis, to step back and kind of like start to understand what am I thinking that's not working, or what are my feelings and what can I do with them, that takes training, and it's very hard to start by self. The good news is that you only need a short time with an external point of reference that can say, hey, you know, like, ask you the right questions. What else can you think about that, or how else can you see that? Once you've done it for however many, you know, sort of times or days or weeks, you start to do it by yourself. So absolutely, I totally subscribe to having some external help to start with. And the data is fascinating. On average, it takes 66 days to change a habit. You can change the way you think. That's a habit. In fact, your whole personality, is a habit. It's something that you sort of coagulated into interacting with your life through your set of responses and thoughts and your behaviors, and that's who you are. But that's not fixed in any way. You can change that.
And I think, does that link into, we talk a lot in corporate around the fixed versus growth mindsets.
Yes.
So this links into that whole concept.
Indeed. If you see every experience as an opportunity to strengthen a facet of your capacity to engage more resourcefully with the situation, then whether it's a good experience or a bad experience, it's always in the service of, I can become better at this.
Yeah.
Even if I fail, that beautiful quip, I think, by Edison, who says, I haven't failed, I only find 10,000 ways that didn't work. It's like the baby. I haven't, yes, I've fallen, but I haven't failed to learn to walk. I've only practiced until I got together, and now I'm walking, right? So we have to absolutely be in that mindset where we don't see any inhibition or things that get in the way, right, as a disaster. They're rather like a challenge where we can, okay, I'll get better at this because now I know that this doesn't work, or I know that I need to find another way to deal with it, all that sort of stuff.
Do you think that that everybody has the capacity to change, to go from a fixed mindset? Because there's a lot of people, obviously, over the years that we've worked with, that you just think, I don't think they can ever change.
I'm laughing because if you look around what's going on the planet, you go, no.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I know there's different personality types. Some are like a type A, type B.
Yes, I think in principle, but there's three different elements that are at play here. The first is, most of us want to feel better, but we don't want to change. It's actually very hard.
Yes.
Really be engaged with wanting to change yourself because we're familiar with who we are. And even if it's not comfortable, right?
Yes.
It's the one we know, right?
100%.
And so I think there's an element of that. There's an element where it's actually very hard to change if the culture around you is prohibitive, or perceive that sort of change as an anathema or a threat to its own existence. And I think the classic example is, you look at relationship between men and women on the planet. Like, by and large, we screw this one up really badly, right? Like, people who look like me are responsible for that relationship being quite unwholesome to each other, but also overall really bad for the planet. The fact that we have no feminine wisdom in our leadership, by and large. Yes, we have, and it's changing. But overall, if you look at numbers, we're a long way from where that interconnectedness, that wisdom that comes to being able to hold the collective.
Yes.
That's missing, and it looks like that. It's evident in the problems that we have, from climate to geopolitics to cultural issues and whatnot, right? So it's very hard, I think, to go against the grain of a culture, especially, and in the case of just provided that gender imbalance is because one side is benefiting from it. I'm very comfortable, right?
Yeah.
Why would I want to change? So if you're in the position of fighting against that glass ceiling, or you're trying to sort of create a fundamental change in the way that a culture is operating and limiting that positive behavioral change, the culture will fight back. through the people who are benefiting from that particular setup. So that's the second element, right? And the third is that most of us give up too easily on the really core stuff that we need to change, which is our attitude to ourselves and to others. It's we invested, we have a mechanism, right, in our own sense of self, in our psychology, that is invested in being in control and avoiding being controlled. And because we have developed that mechanism, our egoic mind, you can call it, right, to deal with reality that our experience as best as we could as children, and therefore from that point onward, that's the way we react. Quite often by the time we're adult, it's not very good at dealing with reality, but we're so used to it, that's who we are. And that psychological kind of baggage, that mechanism is very, very strong, very, very hard to chip at it. We need to soften the edges of it through continuous changes and say, oh, wow, I can benefit from doing it differently. But it takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of practice.
So here's an interesting one for you. So obviously we do a lot of work in the Agile space, and you're probably familiar with that, with working with clients.
Yeah.
So just in corporate, in the way that we work, a lot of the conversation is around that people are not moving to a more agile way of working because they can't change their mindsets and things like that. I believe that having a growth mindset is extremely important in order for a company to adopt agile, but knowing that not everyone is going to be in the growth mindset category. How do we adapt our culture, or what can we do to help those people that maybe, like you said, they either don't have the desire to change or they choose to give up too easily? Like, what can we do to maneuver around that or manage that as leaders in our businesses and in our companies?
Really good question.
What have you seen like with people that you've worked with, or in instances where you've experienced working with people that maybe are really fixed mindset? Like, what sort of tactics could we use, or could we try?
Yeah. There's a few things that I think sometimes you have to highlight to people an unconscious aspect of their experience, right? And as long as it's unconscious, they're not able to see it. Robert Keegan talks about this idea of subject-object relationship, right? So we are subjected to our experience, right? And we are subjective in the relationship with our experience. Therefore, we cannot actually see it as an outsider. We're in that experience, right?
Makes sense.
And at the point where we shift our consciousness, or we shift for that experience to become an object to us, we can see it, then we can have a different relationship with it. But as long as we are unaware of it, right, we might be suffering, but we're not aware that we are in the experience of suffering because that's the way we engage with it, not because that's the way it is. Right? So in the kind of the lowest sort of common denominator of engaging with your reality happens to you. Yes. You are the subjective end of reality happens to you. Therefore, you cannot do anything about it, right? Like you can fight, you can resist, but basically it's out of my control, right? And to a degree it is. Moment by moment, there's a lot of stuff that is out of our control. I mean, anyone who thought we are in control completely, had a pandemic coming up the road and saying, well, actually, no, I don't think so, right? So this interesting sort of dichotomy where, in a sense, we're not in control of circumstances, but we're very much in control with the way we engage with our circumstances. That has to be adopted, right? Yes. And so continuous reference to, okay, that's the way you see that. Can we explore another way to look at it? Yeah. So inviting people to start to step outside their habitual patterns of perceptions and the way that they engage with stuff and say, great. And does that work for you? Do you feel you get the results you wanted? Maybe not. Do you see a pattern where you react in a particular way and not getting a results, right? Okay, let's assume that you actually have some agency there to change. What could you change that will get you a different result? Just humor me, just invent something, right? And this process that comes up a lot in coaching, where you take a specific constellation of circumstances that are repetitive in someone's life, and you get them to see that that might be the case, but they have an opportunity to step outside that and start to experiment with looking at this way or looking at this way, or inventing another way to deal with it. That's a really useful sort of thought experience. Right? So that's one way to kind of engage with it. Another way is to sort of give something like, when we're dealing with a problem, we so engage with that problem that there is no sort of external faraway context to be able to do that. But if I asked you in percentage, how many of the problems that you dealt with today or that you're dealing with on a daily basis are going to be important in 30 years' time?
Yeah, not likely.
Not a lot.
No.
Okay, so if there is a point where it's not important,
yes,
surely I can try and find ways to come back to here and see that it's not that important either if I did something else.
100%.
So creating that external reference point where instead of just, here is the problem and I'm in my face, it's in my face and I'm stuck with it, and you go, no, that might be the circumstances, but try this way or think about it from 30 years time or whatever. That's really kind of useful.
Oh, that's really helpful. And I really like, again, the 3 points that you raised. Like, you have to have the desire to change the cultural sort of around you environment, and then not being, prone to giving up easily. So I think they're really relevant. What do you think makes a good coach? Because I'm hearing everyone is a coach these days, particularly with the rise of Agile and Agile coaching, which I know that is different to, what you do. But what are the traits of a good coach?
Look, I want to separate the what I think is an inherent wholesome drive, where most of us love being in a position of being in service and helping each other. We wired for that, right? And I think a lot of the time people get kind of engaged with doing coaching or, facilitation or mentoring or therapy or whatever, because they care in some ways and they want to help other people, right?
Absolutely.
Then there is, that, like, as a joke, I say the other side of it is, who doesn't want to be a coach? You spend your life telling other people how to think from the comfort of your home, charging a lot of money for it. That's,
100%. 100. And you know what? Just on that, like, the thing that bugs me is, like, there's not really, like, unlike a lot of other professions, there's, guidelines and guardrails and covenants around it, but because there really isn't much, and I don't know if it's changed, but there isn't really much about coaching. So anybody says they're a coach, but I know that the good coaches, or at least the ones that I've experienced working with, and I'm sure you probably have some examples of that. When you're coaching, there's certain traits and characteristics of a coach that makes that person so unique in the skills that they bring to the table. It's very different. So yeah, I'd love to hear what do you think are the traits either someone should already have or that they need to sort of learn to be able to get to that position?
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. There is a regulative issue in the process of as it is now. And all I can say is, that there is an element of connection, which is really important. In other words, the amount of knowledge, in my experience, is useful, but it's not necessarily a must. Like, someone can coach. A coach can be an executive coach for someone who manages a $1 billion portfolio, and the coach doesn't need to have managed a $1 billion portfolio to be able to be a good executive coach for that particular person, right? So it's less to do with knowledge, and it's more to do with the ability to call bullshit. In other words, to understand the psychological kind of patterns of thinking that the person you're working with are engaging with, which are not helping them, to be able to see that. So there is definitely high EQ, I think, is very, very helpful, because essentially EQ is your ability to be self-aware and aware of others, right?
And that's really important in any environment.
Really another element which is quite fascinating to me is that you need to be absolutely loving and yet completely detached of results. If I'm not invested, as soon as I'm invested in you changing in a particular way, I bring my own shit into that.
Okay.
I bring my own personality into that. The best coaching work I've seen done, and I know that when I sit in that space, I do relatively well, is when I get myself out of the way and I'm just being a present, sort of being with you, and then reflecting to you through questions or suggestions or exploration, a process of inquiry, how to look at things differently and how to sort of engage with acquiring new ways of engaging or acquiring new way of behaving with a situation. And then you need to do the hard yakka and do the practice. But I think it's very important that the coach get themselves, out of the way and allow for the presence, in a sense, to channel the capacity to change in the other person, to really just kind of reflect opportunities and things that you didn't know about yourself. I think those two are really quite important.
Yeah, they're definitely commonly seen in those that do what you do really well. And I think I like that you touched on EQ, because it's so important in a corporate environment as well, especially from a leadership perspective.
Humans, we're emotional beings.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really interesting, because we know that there's a lot of challenges at the moment that we're facing whether at work or in our businesses, and around mental health and wellness and resilience. And I'd love if you could just touch a little bit on resilience, because resilience is so critical, obviously, for all of us. So if you could share a little bit of your thoughts on resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is resilience, right? Resilience is your ability to bounce back into assuming that your default state is kind of like open, expanded, comfortable, in the groove, knowing how to roll with whatever is going on. And then something comes and sort of punches you off your seat, or sort of like you're under a barrage of challenges, right? Resilience is your ability to roll with that and then come back as soon as possible to that state of openness and the ability to engage with what's going on without being, sort of daunted by it, right? And so I think in that sense, it has both an internal component of trust, of self, kind of sense of I can do that, a sense of like I whatever it is, bring it on, I'll deal with it. Really trusting that you have the capacity and the power to stay with your experience, not to be daunted by it too much. And then some skillful mechanism of managing an overload, managing something that, whatever it is that's being a stressful factor in your life, the capacity to develop and deal with that, right? And I think if you work on both, if you work on that level of self-awareness and self-trust and real, it's confidence, right? It's a sense of like, whatever it is that happens, I'm good here. I'll deal with it. So that self sense of like trust, and then the skillful applications of better and better ways to deal with overloads, whether it's productivity, whether it's knowing when to say no. That's a tricky one, right? We're not supposed to say no.
Don't know what that means, sorry.
Because as far as your system goes, if you were that tribal member who said no all the time, 100,000 years ago, they'll kick you out.
There's no use for you
all the time, right? So,
so
it's wired into us to be part of a group and to say yes to the group, because that's security, that's safety, that's my belonging, right? So, but in modern life, when you got what's your inbox, right? Your inbox is other people to-do lists. So when all of that stuff coming your way, you need to know how to kind of like say, okay, this yes, and this not right now. And then the other thing that I found really useful with building resilience is the ability to prioritize and figure out what is it that I want to spend my time on today amongst 100 things that I need to do today, right? So that whole thing about, important, urgent, not important, not urgent, that matrix that we see sometimes in management trainings, all of that sort of builds up some resilience, right? Most important is a sense of trusting self, is knowing that I bring it on, I can do that. Can
handle anything.
I can handle everything. And there is a particular point that I want to make here, and it comes out of the fascinating work of a Jewish psychologist called Viktor Frankl, right, who went through the Holocaust and developed logotherapy based on his experiences in the camps, where he got to see that it doesn't matter what happens that you don't have control on, or, well, it does matter, but regardless of what's going on of which you don't have control of, you always have control about what's your relationship with that.
Yes.
You always have control on how you're going to relate to your experience. No one can take that away from you.
100%.
Right? So there is an anchor in resilience that says, okay, whatever it is that's coming my way, whatever circumstances, can I change my focus? Yes. Can I change the meaning I give it? Yes. Can I take action on which I have agency, I have control and respond? Yes. I have a lot of power in that. Just not about what's going on, right?
Yeah, 100%. It goes back to you're in charge of your feelings, you're in charge of your thoughts, and you're in charge of your behaviors. So regardless of that external stimuli and what's going on in the environment around us.
I would finesse it a little bit in the sense that, like you can't control your thoughts and your feelings. They will come and they will rise up.
Yes, of course.
But you can control how, what you do with them.
Yes.
You buy into them, how much you can, like humans have this weird capacity. As far as I know, the only species that has this weird capacity to have a secondary engagement with their emotions. In other words, we get annoyed about being annoyed, or feel sad because we're sad. That's a uniquely human experience because we have a very complex brain.
Yes.
Brain can start to, like, oh, I shouldn't be feeling this, or I shouldn't, like, oh, I always feel like that. When she say that, it's because, I'm all that sort of stuff. That's completely, sorry for my language, but that's completely nuts. Like, no reason to do that other than we habitually do that.
Yes.
So we have power to change, and most of our capacity to become more resilient has to do with the way that we engage and change the inner conversations that is in response to our occurrence moment by moment. A lot of resilience comes from that.
100%. No, I love that. Now, I just wanted to kind of loop back to the work that you do with leaders. With the leadership coaching that you do, what have you been seeing as the common, most pressing challenges? I know we've dealt with, in the world, we've dealt with a lot of challenges in the last few years, but what are you seeing and hearing in the work that you're doing as the most pressing challenges for leaders today?
I think that the first thing is that there is no capacity to orient toward a fixture in the way that a business runs, in the way that the economy is running, in the way that the politics are running. There is nothing outside anymore that you can say, you know what, that's going to be here next year, or I can orient to this because that's a fixed, element in the way that I work. Because everything is, even so, I've heard someone saying, even change is changing. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Yep. I like that.
So I think this idea that as a leader you can orient to external features that allow you to solidly manage whatever it is that you need to manage, that one is fracturing, right? Interestingly, the flip side of it is that what you can orient to that's not going to change is, relationship with other people, innovative mindsets, right? How to think outside the box in any kind of problems that come out, right? How to take an old way and turn it into a new way, all that sort of stuff. Learning how to learn, being able to micro learn whatever is the next challenge and the skills that you miss. So I think leadership is a lot more fluid. I dare say, as per my comment from before, I dare say it needs to be, and I'm being really careful here because of that idea of mansplaining, but I do think it needs to be more feminine. It needs to be more interconnected. It needs to be more aware of the natural intelligence that is available through the group, through the system, and how do I as a leader sort of hold the space for that natural intelligence and that collaborative efforts to be really, sort of empowered and strong and come through. I think that's very much elements that the new kind of leadership, this transformational leadership that we need, rests upon. And the people who do well are the people who are able to live in that complexity and engage everyone that's involved in it and bring the best out of those people. It's not about, oh, I'm the leader, follow me. That's like long gone, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And we need a real humility, I would say, in getting myself. It's not about myself anymore. It's to the degree that I can hold the space for all the elements in the system to work together best. How do I do that as a leader?
It's amazing. You said it really well. And I think that humility is key, and having the empathy as well for others, because everybody's going through something, and we've all gone through something recently.
It's tough.
100%. 100%. I think that the work that you're doing, Michael, is really fascinating, and I'll definitely make sure we link into the show notes all of the links to for people to get in touch with you. How can people get involved with you, and where can they get more information? What's the best place to find you and find out more about you?
Well, the best in sort of like on the professional side, just look me up on LinkedIn and connect with me. Mindfulness coaching is a tag of my LinkedIn profile. You can find me on Instagram under the tag positive neuroplasticity. It's a bit of a mouse, but it's basically positive, and then the word neuro, Neuro, and then plasticity. You are welcome to look at my website. It's because I'm a dinosaur and I'm learning all this stuff as I go along. It's certainly a work in progress, but happyhabits.com.au is the website, and you can reach out through that website. But yeah, easiest is shoot me out a message on LinkedIn or Instagram, and I'll connect with you. And I want to say something else in that context. I feel, again, really grateful and privileged in a way to be doing this sort of work. The idea that you can sit with someone else and just be available for them to discovering their brilliance and their ability to sort of grow and expand. There's nothing more, for me, there's nothing more sort of beautiful and exciting to do that with another human being. So I thrive in that sort of engagement. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or you want to sort of have a chat with me. Please do, because we're here to connect with each other, and
see your passion. And definitely see your passion. On that note, I guess my last question is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners? Maybe a call to action, a piece of advice, or a question to ponder before we close out our conversation today?
Don't wait on anything, right? Don't wait on your dreams. Don't wait on the apologies that you were supposed to, or you want to give to someone. Don't wait on the phone calls that are tricky and you're kind of putting off because they're uncomfortable. Don't trust your system telling you that this is uncomfortable, because it's just doing an old pattern of survival. And you in the 21st century, not in 100,000 years BC, and just honor your system, look after your eat well and exercise and move and all that, but don't believe your emotions and don't believe your thoughts. They're just like the weather. They come and go. You listen to them too much, you'll stop doing the things that will make your life brilliant, right? So take action, but take considered, thoughtful, emotionally connected, wise actions. And if you're not sure how to do that, find a way to learn, find a way to work with someone that helps you to do that. Because life is short, it goes very fast, and if you get to, I've just celebrated my 60th birthday a few weeks ago, and you start to get to an edge where you go, wow, okay, I have an endless bucket list, but not that many years left. And what is important? Oh, people are important, and being open-hearted and watching sunsets, and not the kind of I got another tag in at work that I feel good about. That's also important, but take action on the good stuff, and mainly about anything that stops you from being loving and connected with other people.
Well, happy birthday. And I love the don't wait and create happy habits. So on that note, thank you, Michael, for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on the show. It's fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Look forward to staying connected. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. Please share this with someone or rate it if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and to stay up to date with all things Agile Ideas, go to our website www.agilemanagementoffice.com. I hope you've been able to learn, feel, or be inspired today. Until next time, what's your agile idea?